They're calling it Palestine 194 Day. The Palestinian leadership say they're about to ask the United Nations to vote on a place called Palestine, becoming the UN's 194th member state. But what would such a move mean? Could it boldly advance the cause of peace negotiations stalled for so long? Or would it simply cement divisions between Israel and the Palestinians, setting back the prospect of a settlement even further? On Hard Talk today, Dore Gold and Nabil Shaf, two of the players close to the heart of Israeli and Palestinian power. Nabil Shaf, Palestinian former Deputy Prime Minister, and Dore Gold, former Israeli UN Ambassador and also now close to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you both very much for coming on Hard Talk. Nabil Shaf, if I can begin with you, what exactly are you going to be doing at the United Nations?
We will be asking for membership at the United Nations as the State of Palestine, which was declared in 1988 and have gathered momentum. So today 126 countries in the world recognize it.
Asking the Security Council, asking the General Assembly what?
Well, according to the United Nations rules, full membership can only be granted by the Security Council, but that is where there is a possibility of somebody using the veto.
America. So you'll go to the second best option, which is the UN General Assembly?
We will go to both and collect what we can. I mean, we'll keep knocking at the door of the Security Council, but the General Assembly can also give us a less than full membership. It can give us support. It can give us a recommendation to the Security Council. That we will approach both in the right time.
And just to nail this down, when you say recognition of Palestine as a member state, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said on the 27th of July at a press conference in Ramallah that you're going to be seeking full membership and recognition of Palestine on the 1967 borders. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're going to preempt negotiations?
No.
If the UN is going to be recognizing Palestine with defined borders, you're preempting negotiations.
No, the international law separates between declaring a state and the final border with its neighbors. The border with our neighbors, even though there is a lot of legitimate reasons why we chose the 1967 border, but it will still have to be negotiated with the Israelis in accordance with the resolution 242 of the Security Council.
So it's entirely symbolic. The fact that you're asking the UN for recognition of Palestine on the 1967 borders, it has no force.
No, it has one, and that is we are asking, by doing this, we're asking the world to consider that we are a state whose land is occupied and not disputed. There's a difference between considering all our land to be disputed, that is up for grabs, or occupied, but as it's occupied, any two equal partners can eventually agree on the final demarcation of the border.
And Dore Gold, as far as you're concerned, the UN General Assembly, it already seems, the Palestinians are speaking very confidently about getting a more than two-thirds majority there, but Israel, is going to sit on the sidelines, fold its arms and say no?
Well, Israel has said that it doesn't recognize this as a legitimate act. We have a set of agreements with the Palestinians going back to 1993, and there's a very important clause, a core commitment given by both parties. And both parties recognize that the Oslo agreements are still in force, let me stress. And in that clause, it says that neither side will change the status of the West Bank or the Gaza Strip prior to the completion of permanent status negotiations.
So what have you been doing with the mass settlement of the West Bank and East Jerusalem?
Well, okay, good counterpoint, but let me explain. Settlements don't change the legal status of the West Bank. If you declare a state, you're changing the legal status. If we have a disagreement over where our future borders are, we can move settlements. We already pulled 9,000 people out of their homes. Settlements are a non-issue. The main issue
settlements are a huge issue, because if you're talking legally in a very narrow way, although one can argue how much force legally the UN General Assembly vote will have, but in terms of politics, in terms of the real world, tripling the number of settlers in the West Bank from when the Oslo Accord was signed in the mid-90s to now, that has a tremendous effect.
I have a secret to share with you. When Mr. Rabin negotiated the original Oslo agreement, Yasser Arafat, the PLO chairman, asked for a settlement freeze. And Mr. Rabin said, you know what? This is disputed territory. I will not agree to the freeze. And nonetheless, the PLO signed it. They signed it in '93 and in all the implementation agreements. In fact, let me stress this point. We have negotiated with Palestinian representatives while we build in our areas, and the Palestinians build in their areas. This was never an issue. Olmert negotiated.
It's a huge issue as far as not just the Palestinians, but as far as the rest of the world is concerned. I don't want to get sidetracked onto that. But the reason I raise it is because it's all very well to say that the Palestinians are in abrogation of the Oslo Accords if they go ahead with this, but let's just talk about the real world here and tripling the number of settlers in the West Bank.
Clause in the Oslo agreements that says Israel can build in the areas of jurisdiction. It's not there. The point is this: because of this issue, because of some people in the world insisting on this issue, and unfortunately Abu Mazen, who did negotiate without any freeze of our settlements or their building, nonetheless now because of this issue can't sit down with us. All I'm saying, Nabil, come back to negotiations. Sit down with us. Don't go to the UN. Talk to us.
I want to explore the issue of negotiations in a moment, but can I just ask, in practical terms, what do you think, if this vote goes ahead, what effect will it have? Will it just be symbolic, or will it actually have some effect on the ground?
It will upgrade our international recognition, both by having more countries, particularly after that vote, more countries will recognize us bilaterally, which is really bilateral negotiation counts much more. But being a member of the...
counts in what real sense? I mean, your Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki was quoted just recently as saying, this doesn't make any difference on the ground. Everything is very symbolic these days. Is that what it is? It's just about getting new nameplates?
No. Self-determination is not symbolic. And translating self-determination into a nation-state recognized by the world is not just symbolic. It creates binding commitments between us and all of the countries that recognize us. And it gives us...
Which will change the lives of Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. How?
In
concrete terms? No, but how will it change their lives?
Look, I mean, the major thing that makes it impossible to really change is Israeli occupation and Israeli settlements and Israeli walls and Israeli checkpoints. These are the problems. But the world, as we have upgraded our representation, as the world have looked at us as a state in the formation, we receive lots of support to build our institutions, a lot of support to even give us the ability to hire employees and open...
But that's happening whether you're a member of the United Nations or not.
It has increased significantly as our status has risen. And our ability to be members of all the United Nations organizations, a full member, will also give us rights to utilize international law to support and protect our people, and to really make it harder for Israel to consider us just a people under occupation of disputed territory.
Isn't that a reasonable point, Dore Gold, that actually the Israeli occupation, which a huge number of countries do see as illegal in terms of the transfer of civilian populations, in terms of the route of the separation barrier, which has been decreed illegal by the International Court of Justice, all that is going to become much more difficult for Israel if Palestine is seen as some sort of putative sovereign state?